July 1835. A man walked out of the Australian bush near Port Phillip Bay. He was enormous, over 6 feet 5 inches tall. He was wearing animal skins. He had not spoken English in 32 years. He was carrying a spear that had once marked an Aboriginal grave. The British settlers who saw him thought they were looking at a ghost. His name was William Buckley. He had escaped from a convict settlement in 1803. Everyone had assumed he was dead. William Buckley was born in 1780 in Macclesfield, Cheshire, England. He grew to an extraordinary size, well over 6 feet tall at a time when the average Englishman was several inches shorter. He worked as a bricklayer. He served as a soldier in the Duke of Cumberland's regiment. In 1802, he was arrested and charged with receiving stolen goods. The item in question was a piece of cloth. He maintained he was innocent. The court did not agree. He was sentenced to transportation for life to the new British colony in New South Wales, Australia. Transportation was what Britain did with people it no longer wanted. You went to the other side of the world and you did not come back. Buckley was 22 years old. He was loaded onto a convict ship with hundreds of other men and women who had committed crimes ranging from murder to stealing bread. The voyage to Australia took months. Below decks, in chains, with minimal food and no light. In October 1803, the ship arrived at Port Phillip Bay in what is now Victoria, Australia. The settlement party was led by Lieutenant Colonel David Collins. The plan was to establish a colony at this location. Collins found the land unsuitable. He almost immediately decided to abandon the Port Phillip site and move the settlement elsewhere. While Collins prepared for the move, the convicts were held at the beach camp. Buckley saw the bush stretching inland, vast, unknown, empty of Europeans. In December 1803, Buckley and 5 other convicts escaped from the camp. They took what they could carry, a few tools, some food, and walked into the bush. The others gradually turned back or were captured. Buckley kept walking. He did not know where he was going. He simply went. The Australian bush was nothing like England. The trees were eucalyptus, gray and gnarled, their leaves hanging vertical to avoid direct sun. The animals were entirely unfamiliar. Everything that moved looked dangerous. Much of it was. He had no map, no guide, no knowledge of how to find food or water in this landscape. He walked north and west along the coast. He ate what he could find, berries, shellfish, anything. Weeks passed. He was starving. His clothing fell apart. He was so weak he could barely stand. He picked up a spear he found planted upright in the earth. It had been placed at a grave. He used it as a walking stick. One day he lay down in the scrub and could not get up. He was found by a group of Aboriginal women from the Wathaurong people. They saw a giant white man lying near a grave marker spear, delirious and barely alive. They made a decision about him. They believed he was the reincarnation of a recently deceased man from their tribe, a man who had been tall, like this figure. They took him with them. They fed him. They gave him water. They let him recover. The Wathaurong people lived across the land around Port Phillip Bay and the Barwon River. They had lived in this country for tens of thousands of years. They knew it in a way that Buckley, with his English training, could not have imagined. He stayed with them. At first there was no choice. He was too weak to leave, and he had nowhere to go. But as weeks became months, something changed. He began to learn their language, not by study, but by immersion, by living, day after day, in a world where English was useless. He learned where to find water in the dry season. He learned which plants were edible. He learned how to read the land. He was adopted into the tribe formally. He had a name. He had a place. He was given a wife. He participated in ceremonies. He lived by the rules of the Wathaurong world. Years passed. He was present for births and deaths. He participated in raids and settlements of disputes. He watched children grow into adults. He stood, always, at least a foot taller than anyone around him. He was conspicuous in that way forever. But in every other way, he had become part of what surrounded him. 10 years passed. Then 15. In England, the Napoleonic Wars were fought and finished. In Australia, more British ships arrived at different points on the coast. Buckley was not there to see them. He was inland, moving with the Wathaurong through their seasonal patterns. His English faded. It is hard to explain how completely a language can leave you when you never use it. Words went first, then grammar, then the capacity to construct sentences. By the time 20 years had passed, Buckley could remember almost nothing of English. He sometimes tried to recall words at night. Most of them were gone. He was not the same man who had walked out of the convict camp in 1803. That man was English. This man was something the English language had no word for. He participated in the internal conflicts of the Wadhorong, their wars with neighboring groups, their disputes, their alliances. He was never a chief. He was always an anomaly, too different to lead, too trusted to ignore. 25 years, 30 years. He stopped counting. In 1835, a ship appeared in Port Phillip Bay. This time it was not leaving. A group of settlers had come to establish a permanent colony. They rowed ashore. They began to mark out land. The Wadhorong knew what ships meant. They had been watching the coast for decades. Buckley watched from the bush. Something was happening to him. The sight of the ship, the sound of English voices carrying across the water. Sounds he had not heard in 32 years. He stayed in the bush and watched for several days. He did not know what to do. He was not sure he remembered how to do anything English. But he walked toward them. The settlers saw him coming from a distance and were frightened. An enormous figure, wearing animal skins, carrying a spear, approaching through the scrub. He reached the edge of their camp. He tried to speak. What came out was not quite English. He could remember individual words. He could not string them together. The settlers found a woman who spoke some Wadhorong language. She spoke to him. Buckley began to cry. The English sounds were coming back, one by one, like something surfacing from very deep water. Over hours, and then days, the language returned. Not perfectly, never perfectly again, but enough. He told them his name was William Buckley. He told them he had escaped from the convict camp in 1803. The settlers were astonished. A man had lived alone among the Aboriginal people for 32 years. He had survived. He had adapted completely. Governor Sir Richard Burke granted Buckley a full pardon. He was given clothes. He was given money. He was brought back into the European world. But the European world was not comfortable for him. The food tasted wrong. The buildings felt confining. The social rules were foreign. He had spent his formative adult years in a world with entirely different rules. He was 55 years old. He had been living in the bush since he was 23. He found work as an interpreter, helping the colonial administration communicate with the Wadhorong and other Aboriginal groups. He was useful in this role. He knew both worlds. But his role was uncomfortable. The colonists were taking land. The Aboriginal people were losing it. Buckley had lived among them. He knew what was being taken. He could not stop it. His role was to translate, not to determine policy. He married a woman named Julia Eagers in 1840. He tried to build a life. He lived in Geelong. He was a curiosity, the man who had lived with the natives. He gave an account of his experiences to a journalist named John Morgan. It was published in 1852. The book was read widely. It was the first detailed account of life among the Aboriginal people of Victoria from an insider perspective. His account described their customs, their laws, their relationship with the land. He described 32 years of knowledge that no European had ever recorded. In January 1856, Buckley was traveling in a carriage near Geelong when it overturned. He was 76 years old. The injuries were serious. He died 2 days later. His obituary described him as the wild white man. The expression Buckley's chance entered the Australian language around this time. It means no chance at all, an impossible hope. The irony is that Buckley himself had survived exactly the kind of situation that phrase describes. He had escaped into a wilderness with nothing and had lived in it for 32 years. By every calculation, he should not have survived the first month. He survived 32 years. He died in a carriage accident on a country road. Somewhere in Victoria, the bush he walked into in 1803 is still there. The eucalyptus trees are still gray and gnarled and indifferent to human plants.